Don't worry about the noise. You know, in Kabbalah it's written that when something important is happening, then the dark forces try to interfere. Right? So we'll just ignore it. Do you know what the mazal of this month? You know, every month has a mazal, right? You familiar with that? Every month has a different spiritual energy, a zodiac or a mazal. Mazal means a flow of shefa, energy coming into the world. And every month of the 12 months has a different one. And every one of those mazalot is corresponding to a different part of the body and a different part of the world and a different ability of the body. Many, many 12s in Torah. The faculty of the body that is represented in Adar is laughter. Laughter? Laughter? That is what it is. And that needs study. Why do we laugh? What is important about laughing? And why is it the mazal of Adar, which was a month of tragedy, which turned to redemption? What is the laughter in that? The Jewish people were designated for destruction, all of them on one day. There never has been a bigger threat than that. And that paradoxically turned into a redemption. Why is that something that should occasion laughter? What is the meaning of human laughter? Why is it especially relevant to women? Let's see if we can try to understand that. By the way, how do we know that laughter is a woman's faculty? How do we know that? Who? Oh, that's good. That's good. Give me another proof. I see we have black belts here. How do we know that a woman of spiritual greatness knows how to laugh? But tischak leyom acharon, right? A woman of spiritual greatness, as we sing in praise of our wives on Friday night. Do you do that as well?
Yes.
That's a universal custom, and we say she knows how to laugh at the day of death. That tischak leyom acharon. That's very, very strange. So let's see if we can plumb the depths of what it means to be a woman through the idea of laughter. How do we study a subject like this? So we know that everything in the material world is projected from the spiritual world. That's the deepest principle that we have. The world of spirit is expressed in the world of the material. The rule is that everything you will ever experience in this world comes from a higher source. And everything that Hashem has in His higher world, in His name, He projects into this world. There's a complete correspondence. He included nothing in His name that He does not want us to know here. And everything that He gives us to experience in this world, whatever it is, any experience, any object, any part of the body, any part of the world, is teaching you about a spiritually deeper world. And the reason we are here is to learn about that world. We're not here to engage the material world. Machines do that, animals do that. We're in the material world to use it in bodies that are material, to access something deeper. And there's always a one-to-one correspondence. The Ramchal calls it a koach nivdal. That means everything in the material has a koach nivdal, something that transcends it. The most obvious example is the body. You see the body is telling you about something deep. Through my body you access something that we call the neshama. You never see it. No matter how well you know someone, you live with someone for 50 years. You never see them, you only see the external of their body. But if you observe it carefully, it will take you into the depth. You watch every gesture, every nuance of expression, every word. That will take you into the depth. We know that women do that better than men. Women are more easily able to look at the external and see something inwardly. Men usually get stuck at a more superficial level. It's more difficult for them. That's why women are judges of character. They have an intuition about character. But that is the principle. You don't relate to somebody in order to know their body. That's a very vulgar level of relationship. You need the body, but the body is a vehicle that gets you to know the inner being. And therefore, the world is a correspondence. There's a spiritual source, and it's projected onto the screen. Your neshama is projected onto the screen of your face and your body. So when we want to understand something deep about the world, we want to know something that Hashem reveals to us, then we study that thing in the material world. And if you study it exactly and accurately and objectively, you'll know the spiritual source. If you want a very, very simple analogy, simple mashal. Do you ladies want to move forward another step so those people can fit in? Move 1 feet. Okay, let's try again. Let's take a simple example. There was a time when movies were projected, a film was moved in front of a light and projected on a screen, right? That's a movie. I'm sure you've never seen such a thing, but that's how it used to be done. The film has the same picture as the screen. You're watching what's happening on the screen, but it's coming from someplace else. Actually, what's on the film also comes from another place. You're watching a very distant reflection. But if you watch it carefully, you will recognize those people and you'll recognize those places because it's only two dimensions. It's a very thin reflection of the original reality, but it's accurate. That's exactly how the body is. When you observe the body carefully, the material of a face, and movements and motions of a body, if you watch them accurately and understand them, you'll get to know the person. The whole world is like this. The world is a body, and the neshama of the world is Hashem. And we're here to know Him. So here's what we do. If you want to know those places, you watch the movie, and you'll know what you need to know about those places. The Torah, by the way, Torah is the film, and the world is the screen. That's why everything in the world is a word of Torah. And that's why in Hebrew, the word for a word is the same as the word for a thing. In Hebrew, davar is an object, and davar is a word. Why? Because every object in the world is a word of Torah that's projected into that thing. And that's why if you wish to understand anything deeply in the world, look at the word that Torah uses for that thing. Because that's the genetic material that projects itself into that thing. That's the correspondence. So far, so good? Mm-hmm. Anyone out there? Yeah. So when we want to understand something deep, we will explore its revelation in the world. What is laughter? Stay carefully with me. What does laughter teach us about the deep world? What does laughing teach us about the spiritual world? What does Hashem want us to understand? From laughter, and why is it a woman who can teach this lesson most deeply? How do we explore a subject like that? Here's what we do. When you want to know someone well, watch them carefully. Observe their behavior and the details of expression with sophisticated insight, and you'll know who they are. So what we do is we take the phenomenon in the world, we study it deeply, and if you understand it deeply with sophistication and intuition and wisdom, you will know what it's teaching about the spiritual world. So let's study laughter. That's what we'll do. Let's take a look at human laughter. If we understand it accurately, we'll know something very deep about Hashem and about human history. Okay, is the agenda clear? So let's examine what makes people laugh, what is a sense of humor, and let's see how far that can take us. Human laughter is a very peculiar thing, very strange. First of all, it's uniquely human. Do you know that only humans can laugh? I'm talking about have a sense of humor. Only humans can. I'm talking about understanding something humorous that evokes laughter. First of all, it's uniquely human. Secondly, you can only laugh at something human. There's nothing a tree can do that can make you laugh, unless maybe it looks like a person. There's nothing an animal can do that can make you laugh, unless it looks like a human, or a human looks like an animal. Or a baby looks like an old person looks like some distortion of the human can make you laugh. Is this clear? Yes. It has to be human. There's no part of the natural world that can be funny. Amazingly, humor is something that only humans get, and you can only laugh at some peculiarity of the human condition. What makes us laugh? You know, there's a lot of research on this. If you read the literature on this subject, there are famous books on it. Freud wrote a book about laughter. Freud. It's called The Joke and its relation to the unconscious. It's a heavy book. I don't think it will help. Freud tries very hard to explain what psychologically happens when we laugh. Many theories, very deep insights, fails to understand why we laugh. A famous French philosopher, Henri Bergson, a Jew actually, 50, 60, 70 years ago, wrote a famous treatise on laughter. Very insightful, amazing, fails to understand why it is that we laugh. There's tremendous, famous research on this subject. There are many theories. There are 5 main theories of laughter, but there's probably 80 or 90 general theories. One theory is the play theory. We laugh because it's a form of play. Another one's called the catharsis theory. That means it's a release of energy. When something builds attention in one direction and suddenly you see it's not like that, it's a release of energy. There's a theory called the superiority theory. Makes you feel superior. When somebody very conceited and self-important is walking down the street and slips on a banana peel and falls flat. You laugh because you're superior, you didn't fall. That's another theory. There are many theories, and they're all true in some dimension. But what is the essence? What is the essence of laughter? And when you analyze it, you see that what makes us laugh is very often not funny at all. Not at all funny. Here's this very conceited individual who slips on a banana peel. I mean, what is funny about that? And even as you run to help him, you can't hide a smile because it's so ridiculous. You have to be 3 years old to enjoy that. I mean, why do we laugh at things like that? And by the way, these situations have one unique characteristic. When you're going through them, they're not funny at all. Not at all. You fail to see the humor completely. That's very peculiar. Here's this person, very dignified, very self-important, and he's making this famous, amazing speech. He doesn't know that a little child has pinned a bushy tail to the back of his suit. I mean, what is funny about that? And the answer is that all humor is always built on an unexpected paradox, an incongruous putting together of opposites. That's what makes us laugh. Right? When something happens that you think is going in one direction, and suddenly you realize it wasn't going that way at all. And the more sudden and the more extreme the change, the funny, professional comedians, they know how to do this. They take you in one direction, and when you're least expecting it, they will change it into the opposite. And that putting together of two opposites, unexpected, completely incongruent, makes us laugh. There's nothing funny about the thing, but our response, it's an inarticulate, joyous expression at seeing something go in one direction, and suddenly you see that wasn't the direction at all. Cultures make a difference. You know the difference in American humor and British humor? American humor is when a man's walking down the street and there's a banana peel, he doesn't see it, he slips on the banana peel and he falls down. British humor is a man walking down the street, sees a banana peel, sees it, steps over it and falls into a manhole. Right? That's British humor. Anyway, the point is that in each case there's something that is bizarre and unexpected. The mother calls her son, Oscar, are you driving on the highway? Say, yes, Mom. So Oscar, be really careful. The police say there's some crazy guy on the highway driving the wrong way against all the traffic. He says, Mom, there's hundreds of them. When you realize the direction you thought was the right one is exactly the opposite, we laugh. What does that teach us? Ladies, stay with me carefully. What does that reversal teach us about the spiritual world? In our world, it may be silly, it may be trivial, it may be childish. You see something go in one direction, very, very embarrassing and sad for the person who's going through it. But watching from the side is so ridiculous that it's humorous. What does that teach us about the spiritual world? And the answer is, I don't think there's any way to say it softly. The answer is the transition from this world to the next. The most humorous event in human life, human existence, is leaving this world and moving into another one. Because there's no paradox as sharp as that. Where from here it looks like tragedy, but from that side it's the opening of another world. Let's try to understand this. We say that a woman of greatness can laugh at that. We also say, the Pasuk says, Az yemale schok pinu, then our mouth shall be filled with laughter. The Gemara says about that, what does it teach us? Every Pasuk in Torah has to teach us something. There's no poetry or just descriptions. Right? For example, like when it says, V'yamenu ketzel, vodka? When it says, V'yamenu ketzel over, our days are like a passing shadow. What do you learn from that? It's poetry. No, you have to make every day count. Every verse, every pasuk is teaching you something practical. Az yemale, then our mouth shall be filled with laughter when the Mashiach comes, when history finally reveals its destination. Then the Gemara says, from that you learn that you should not have a mouth full of laughter in this world. It's inappropriate in a world of tragedy. You should laugh, you have to be happy. You have to be spiritually graded enough to always be happy. In Ara marbim b'simcha. In Av mamatim, we have less happiness. It doesn't say no happiness or increased sadness. Now we have more joy. In sad times you have the less joy. You always have to be in joy. But then, our mouths will be full of laughter. Now it's inappropriate to laugh completely and utterly, with no reserve at all. That's inappropriate. The world is full of tragedy. So there needs to be some reserve. But then, Amat. So the simple explanation is, this is a world of tragedy. In time of Mashiach, it will be joyful, and we'll be able to laugh. It's not what it means. It means when the tragedy turns to redemption, that will be funny. The transition, when a world that looks like a world of death turns out to be a world where the death forces and the tragedies of life turned out to be the reason that the redemption, there's a famous work on death and dying. I mean, I don't mean this to be too heavy. I didn't come here to depress you. The subject is laughter, but I understand it. A woman should have the greatness to understand this. There's a famous work on death and dying. That's called Gesher HaChaim. In the third part of that work, about the halachot of mourning and so forth, lo aleinu. In that book, in the third part, he talks about the Kabbalistic aspect of moving from this world to the next. And he talks about two babies in the womb. He's talking about the experience of having to bury somebody in your family. What he's talking about. With all the tragic torment of that moment. But deeply you should know that this person who's moving out of your sight is moving into a world that makes this one pale into insignificance. So he talks about two twins in the womb. And they have this incredible idyllic existence within their mother's body. Mi yitneini ki yarchei kerem. Who could give me like those months of Yor? Kim me'el akayish mareni, when Hashem surrounded me completely. That's how the baby feels in the womb. And suddenly, unexpectedly, these tremors begin, and the one twin is born into the world. The little twin who remains in the womb begins to mourn for the child who must have died. There's no way he could survive out there without his mother's support. Little does he know that out there is where life only begins. Now you don't see that from here. But emunah means knowing that what you can't see, let me put it to you like this. The Rambam, who was a doctor, like the best rabbis are, the Rambam puts it like this. He says when a woman's giving birth, she goes through an impossible transition. Completely and utterly life and death impossible transition. First of all, it looks like a woman's dying, let alone the baby. Looks like, I don't mean to put you off, ladies, I'm sure you'd enjoy it. It's a wonderful mitzvah, I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. But the point is that it does not look like, I always tell the men, imagine you're a man, you've never seen a woman give birth. You have no idea what it means. You think it's got something to do with the stalk. And you're wandering the corridors of your local hospital looking for the accounts department when you accidentally step into a labor ward and watch a woman giving birth for the first time. Like up close. You'd probably call the police. I don't know what, and if you had to go through it, you'd need therapy for the rest of your life. I mean, you would never recover. You would never recover. But that's nothing compared to what the baby goes through. Do you know what happens to a baby in the womb when it's born? The child in the womb has conditions that keep it alive, each of which guarantees death when it's born. A child in the womb lives underwater with no air to breathe. He has holes in his heart, with blood goes in the wrong direction. He has major blood vessels coming out through his umbilicus. He's got the wrong sort of blood. He has no lungs. The baby in the womb has little closed up lungs. One of the biggest blood vessels in the body takes all the blood away from the lungs in the opposite direction. He's got exactly the reverse of what he needs to survive in the world. He has 20 conditions that keep him alive there that would kill him when he's born. And you in your body have 20 conditions that keep you alive, that if you gave any of them to the baby, you'd kill him. You're talking about coming from one opposite to the extreme opposite. There's no way that child could survive. No way. And I've delivered dozens of babies. And I can tell you, you deliver this little baby and you hold him in your hands. First he goes blue, then he goes purple, then he makes these terrible gasping movements. He can't breathe, his lungs never opened before. Right? He's bleeding furiously. A newborn baby has about this much blood, that's all. And he's bleeding furiously. There's nothing you can do. And as you stand there helplessly and you hold this little child, suddenly the cord clamps down like a cable of steel and stops the bleeding. At exactly the same moment, the holes in the heart close and the blood reverses direction. At exactly the same moment, the blood vessel going away from it closed down, the blood hits the lungs. At exactly the same moment, takes his first breath and the lungs open. And about 3 minutes later, it's all reversed and he's doing fine. That must have taken a good few chimpanzees in the trees during evolution to get right by accident. There must have been a lot of orangutans that didn't make it. That is very funny. No, it's not funny when you're going through it. I know. Get a good anesthesiologist. Yeah. But that's very funny. And a woman has been through that in her flesh. And that's why she's the one who can laugh at that moment. And she's going through a woman who's unprepared feels only pain. What could seem more tragic? But a woman who's prepared, who knows that each of these pains is bringing a new life to the world, that's called emunah. If you have the ability to see what's happening and what's coming, that reversal will happen. Az yamale, not now. Then you'll be able to love. The baby's only born because of those pains. You know that the coming of Mashiach is called Chevlei Mashiach. Chevlei Mashiach, the birth pains of Mashiach. I'm sure you have enough pictures. Birth pangs of Mashiach. We will all have to be a woman to that experience. Why is it called Chevlei Mashiach? Because when the Mashiach comes, the Jewish people will go through a process that is so agonizing, that will look exactly like a woman in labor. And only those who have emunah, which means to see where it's going, will be able to get through it. You know, there's a midrash that says, amazing midrash, the midrash says that before the Mashiach comes, the Arabs will have a building where the Bet HaMikdash should stand. This midrash was written before Islam became a religion. Right? There's no mistaking, it says the Bnei Yishmael. Email me, I'll send you the text. Just before the Mashiach arrives, the leaders of the Jewish people go to the leaders of the Bnei Ishmael and they say to them, remove your building, we want to build a Bet HaMikdash. And the Arabs say, no, it's our holy place. Sound familiar? Then the Arabs turn to the Jews and they say, why should we battle? Let's make a divine test. Let's see which of us Hashem wants. We have emunah, in case you hadn't noticed. Amazing emunah, ready to die at a moment's notice. One of the great rabbis said, Halavai Aleinu, that we should have such commitment. Let's make a test. You Jews build a mizbech, an altar, put a sacrifice on, like in the days of old. We will build, put a let's see if fire comes min hashamayim for which of our offerings, but we make a deal. If Hashem accepts ours, you follow our religion. If Hashem accepts yours, we follow the Torah. And the Jews agree. The Midrash says, the Bnei Ishmael, they make a mizbech, they put a korban on. The Jewish people make one as well. And fire comes min hashamayim to accept the Arabs' offering. Wow. Test of emunah. Giving birth doesn't look like it's life. At that moment, they turn to the Jews and they say, we had a deal. The Jews say, never. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's a terrible battle. Those who survive flee to the desert, and after 30 days of hiding in the desert, the Mashiach arrives. I once asked Rasim Rabassaman, my great teacher, will it be like that? He said it will be exactly like that. Just like a labor. Where the pains are unreasonable and not logical at all. But if you're prepared and you know that this is leading, and those have, you know, this is a woman's experience. A man has no idea about this. What does a man contribute to the birth of a child? Nothing. Nothing. Half a genetic code, that's all. No pain, no staying power, no loyalty, no strength of character, nothing, zero. All the woman, day after day of pregnancy with a crisis of birth. Of course you need the inspiration at the beginning. Hashem begins the process, but we walk the walk through history with all its difficulty. That is the process of historic laughter, and that's why we say Batischak is a woman who can do that. Why do we sing that on Friday nights? Because Shabbat is the time when the long walk of history becomes Mashiach. Shabbat is a premonition of the end of history. 6 days of the week, moving into Shabbat, which is an endpoint destination. Just like 6,000 years of history lead to 1,000 years of Shabbat, exact parallel. And therefore, the way we move into Shabbat, the idea of Shabbat is to feel how you will feel in the next world. What's the meaning of Shabbat? It's not a weekend. Shabbat means to sit, by the way. You know that? One of the meanings of Shabbat means to sit down. It also means lashuv, to return. Shabbat takes you back to your original purity. Like every destination, every journey, you get to the destination that you specified before you began. That's why the world, according to Kabbalah, is standing on two snakes. The straight one and the round one that has tail in his mouth. When you get to the end of the journey, it's where you began. Shabbat means to return, and it means to sit. Because they're not walking on Shabbat. Jewish life is called halacha. Walking. Shabbat is where you sit, you've arrived, the destination, there's no place to go. That's why you don't create on Shabbat. You observe Shabbat by not creating. Because when you get to the next world, no more opportunity to create. Shabbat is an opportunity to experience what you have become. The week is for becoming, Shabbat is for being. If you reach Shabbat and you're not different than you were the week before, you failed. Shabbat is a circle which is a spiral. Each time you come back to Shabbat, you more elevated. And the next time, back to the same point, higher than you were before. Shabbat is it's an experience of practicing what it will feel like to be in a world where there's no longer opportunity to create. And therefore the transition from the week to Shabbat is exactly that. Mashiach is the transition, the interface between the week, between history, and the final. And therefore it's a woman at that moment of transition when the week of work becomes the ecstasy of Shabbat. That's a woman who can understand that moment. And that's why we talk about Vatischat Yom Achar. We're thinking about the final love. Is this clear? Are we getting somewhere?
Yes.
You know, the first Jewish child ever born was called laughter. Avraham Avinu began the process, and the first child born into that is called Yitzchak. That's a very strange name for a child. His name is, he will laugh. We're talking about the last laugh, by the way. Jewish history not be funny at all. What counts is the last laugh. Yitzchak, why? Because his parents are told they will have a child when it's completely impossible. Completely impossible. His father's too old, his mother's too old, she had no womb. It says, En la vlad, the Talmud says, En la bet vlad, she had no womb. There was no way they could have a child. And Hashem said, you're going to have a child. It's some child. So they laugh. Of course you laugh. Laughter is the response to an impossible inversion. Of course that's what you do. And when he's born, he's called laughter. He's an impossible being. But the story gets funnier. When he's old enough to get married, Hashem says to his father, fine, now kill him. There's a real comedy, you understand, Torah. Yoshev Bashamayim Yitzchak, the one who sits in heaven is laughing. Hashem is watching history and he's laughing. He's sad too. So Avram takes him, he puts Yitzchak on the Mizbech, he takes his neck, he takes the knife, he's about to kill him, and he looks up and says, Hashem, this is impossible. Impossible not because I can't do it, because you could not want this. There's no way you could want this. You know, people, they teach the children that Avram did this great act of sacrificing his child because it was very emotionally difficult. He loved him very much and he waited 100 years. And that's not correct. That is not correct. It was not emotionally difficult. It was not emotionally difficult. He was doing Hashem's will. He was doing it with a simcha shel mitzvah. Simcha. Do you know how we know that he felt joy when he was about to do that act? The Ralbag says that he must have been feeling joy. Because as he was about to kill him, he heard a malach call to him. That's a voice of nevuah, prophecy, and you cannot receive prophecy if you're distressed. You have to be in joy. Isn't that amazing? The Sephardim, you people, you guys, you have in your machzor, look on Yom Kippur, we don't have it, Ashkenazim, the most beautiful period about that, where it says Avram had one eye crying and one eye laughing. Tears from one eye for his son's death, and one eye laughing with the joy of fulfilling Hashem's mitzvah. That's what it says. So what happened? He takes his neck, but the meaning is, the impossibility is not because it was emotionally difficult, the impossibility was because he knew Hashem did not want this. The Gemara says that when he was about to sacrifice Yitzchak, he was about to do something that was impossible, not for him, but for Hashem. Here's the pasuk, it says, Asher lo chafatzti, lo tziviti, velo alta al libi. This killing of your child was something that I never wanted, I never commanded, and I never dreamed of. Hashem says. Because he did not want it, he stopped it. So what happens? He's walking towards that experience with his child. And he says, Hashem, there's no way you could want this. Never mind me. There's no way you could want this. Like the beloved knows the heart of the beloved. He knew that there's no way that Hashem would want this, and he was right. So he takes his child, he's about to kill him, and he says, Hashem, this is impossible. You don't want this. And Hashem says, right, quite correct. Now kill him anyway. Talk about impossible. So what happened? The Chumash says, as you know, he survived. Yitzchak got up and survived. The Zohar says he was killed. Which of those happened? Both. Is that possible? No. Yitzchak became... Actually, the Zohar says there's a knife approached his neck, his neshama left, and then a moment later it returned to him at a higher level. Because he is... And what happens amazingly due to that experience? Here's a child who goes through a death experience, and that death experience makes him immortal. From that day on, we become indestructible. That's very funny. This child who goes through that experience becomes the forefather of the Jewish people, that for the last 4,000 years they've been trying to kill us, and we're the only ones still here. That is very funny. Not when you're going through it. The smallest of all people, Do you know that the numbers of Jews on earth, we're smaller than the error in the Chinese census? You know, like less than the amount they round off at the end. Completely negligible. For most of our history without a country, totally persecuted, no defense, no army, and we're still here. Predicted that we would be like that. Predicted that when we were out of Israel, the land would not flourish for anyone, but flourish when we came back to it. I mean, condition after condition, the most impossible, and we're still here, fulfilled it all. We begin where the impossible ends. The word Yitzchak, by the way, the Zohar says, the word spells Ketz Chai, death in life. The next world in this world. That's what Yitzchak is. But all of Jewish history is like that. Haman makes a gallows to hang Mordechai. The Medrash says he climbed up and he put his head in the noose to make sure that it fitted. And the Malach Gabriel came down and looked and said, suits you. Wherever you look, Pharaoh is sitting on his throne and he's making a decree that all the babies, all the boys should be killed. You know, the Midrash says he ordered even Egyptian boys to be killed. You know that because his astrologers couldn't tell him if the child that he was seeking would be an Egyptian or a Jew because Moshe was both. He was Jewish but raised. So he had all the boys killed. So here's this great king sitting on his throne. He's made an instruction that every boy born should be killed. And on his own knee, he's raising the child. He's raising the... That is very funny. Or the brothers, they sold Yosef. You remember the story? So they sold him, they made a terrible mistake. And year after year, the tragedy deepens. Their father loses his prophecy. They're starving. It gets worse, like most crises, right? When you think it couldn't get worse, it gets a lot worse. 22 years later, convinced that they've destroyed the future of the world, full of remorse. Can you imagine how did they survive for those years? With the evidence that they'd done something tragically and cosmically wrong. And finally they come down to Egypt begging for food, and some weird individual, strange individual, starts tormenting them, completely unreasonably. They knew they deserved, they had no idea what it meant. And finally they get their food, they're going back, they think it's okay, and then they hear the hoofbeats after them. You've stolen the cup, you know the story? And finally they stand in utter hopelessness. They stand in front of Yosef. But listen to the humor of this. They don't know it's their brother. And what's he doing to them? He's putting them through exactly what they need to fix them. Every inexplicable tragedy, not just the torment, but not understanding a thing, is exactly what they need to fix them. What's he doing? He's trying to put them in a situation that they were in all those years before, when they dropped a brother and betrayed a brother. And he wants to put them exactly the same, not with Yosef, but this time with Binyamin, a child of the same mother, and this time have the courage and the corrected insight to this time stand by him with those completely logical. And they're big stakes. It's the future of the world at stake, the Jewish people and the future of the world. But they have no idea. Like we have no idea what's happening to us. And finally they stand in front of Yosef, and he says to them, okay, you can all go home, just leave Binyamin. And at that moment the world collapsed. The world collapsed. What were their options? Either leave Binyamin there and go home and kill their father. The Midrash said that he would have seen them in the distance and realized Binyamin was not among them. He would have died of grief on the spot. Yaakov would have died. Or they could have killed everybody. The Midrash says there was superhuman strength. Yehuda in fact called the brothers together and he said to them, you destroy one city each and I'll kill three. Talking about mass murderers. Those were the options, right? To destroy society or go home and kill their father. Complete, utter hopelessness. And in that moment, Yehuda steps forward and he says to Yosef, I have no idea what this means. This is utterly bizarre, but I know one thing. I promised my father that I'd bring him back. Take me. And that moment of complete annulment of ego, at that moment they hear the words, and Yosef. That is very funny. When do they hear the words? At the least possible moment. And where do the words come from? The source of the problem. Not the cavalry riding in, from left, The source of the problem becomes the pains of labor or what bring the child into the world. It's not funny when you're going through it. Those brothers were not laughing. The Midrash says they were paralyzed with shock. They couldn't move. You had to kiss them and hug them and speak to them in Hebrew. They couldn't move. The meaning of this is that when the Mashiach arrives and the world corrects itself, everything will be turned upside down. Completely inverted. Completely. Everything you know, all the values of the world you live in will be inverted. And therefore the solution is we live upside down now. That's how Jews should live. Upside down. You walk around on your head. All their values are exactly wrong. Let them laugh at you, it's fine, because we're interested in the last laugh. When everything's turned the right way up and we're the right way up, that's cool. That's the way it has to be. And therefore you raise your children to live at variance. Of course they have to live successfully in the society, obviously it's a great skill. But the depth of our values is completely opposite to the world around us. And that's how we live, so that when it's turned upside down, we'll be the right way up. That's the last laugh. Anyway, ladies, this is some introductory thoughts to Purim. Purim is the hilarity of unmasking reality. Why do we wear masks on Purim? Because it's all an illusion. It's all false. The humor of Purim. Esther's the hidden one. Esther means to hide my face. And Esther introduces a world, a series of centuries in which Hashem will not reveal himself. You know, if you make a map of history, it's so important to know this. If you make a map of 6,000 years of history, right? The Gemara says we'll live through 6,000 years of history. By the way, these are the 6,000 years. This is where we are. 5779. We are late. Erev Shabbat. You can smell the chum cooking. It's time to put on your Shabbat clothes. We've seen all the predictions come true. Every detailed prediction. Every prophecy except the final messianic showdown. But if you take our phase in history and you go back 2,300 years, you get to Esther. And what happened then? The world went dark. Until she lived, there was prophecy and miracles. Hashem revealed himself, you had to be blind not to see. Nevi'im was speaking. Miracles were occurring. And then Purim was the time when the light began to fade. And after that, nothing at all. Nothing. The Megillah Purim, Megillah means to roll up and close, and it means to be Megaleh, to reveal. Esther's the one whose face is hidden. Hashem goes into hiding. Purim means the luck of the draw. You don't see Hashem's hand. Purim, the luck of the draw. It's not even a Hebrew word, the Persian word. Esther means the moon in Persian. The moon gets hidden all the time. Then it comes back again. The whole Megillah does not mention Hashem's name because you don't see him. Show me another book of Tanakh where Hashem's name is not on every line. The whole book doesn't mention Hashem's name because he's gone into hiding. Yes, it says HaMelech, so we know when it says the king, it means him, but it doesn't say that. There's a debate in the Gemara about whether Purim, the Megillah, fits in Tanakh or not. Is it a book of the Bible or not? Debatable. Maybe it's only inspired, maybe it's prophecy, maybe it's not. Gemara concludes that it must be prophetic because it says in the Pasuk, Vayomer Haman belibo. Haman said to himself. You have to be a prophet to know what a person said to himself. Okay, it's in. But it's debatable. Until then you have books of the Tanakh, Torah, Hashem speaking openly. After that, nothing. What happened after Purim? 150 years later, Hanukkah. Hanukkah has no book at all. Nothing. No prophecy, nothing at all. Not even a Mishnah, nothing about Hanukkah. Hanukkah is completely in the era of human beings have to making their own decisions. By the way, what was the first human decision? What was the first rabbinic decision? What was the first time a rabbi made a decision for the Jewish people with no prophecy? At least in Mordechai's time, there were prophets still around. But later, at the time of Hanukkah, there was Matityahu, who was in charge. So one day he got up and he said, gentlemen, I've made a decision. So, Rabbi, what's your decision? We declare war on the Greek Empire. Rabbi, are you in whose army? Well, there's me and my sons, you know, and a couple of friends. There's 13 of us. I think we, Rabbi, the Greek army, like 10,000. Yeah, I think we can do it. Rabbi, did you ask the prophets? No, none of them. Did you seek the guidance of the Urim V'Tumim? No, I haven't been around for a long time. Rabbi, what makes you think? My Torah tells me we should do this. And they won. We have moved deep into the era of no visible proof at all. Nothing. No miracles. We don't see any revealed miracles. Now we see amazing hidden miracles. We see amazing coincidences where Hashem reveals himself behind the scenes. But we see nothing open. No prophecy or no miracles. We are deep, thousands of years, into the long walk through history with nothing provable at all. It's very tough for the children, by the way. Very hard for the children. Where they live in a world where there's no... We have compelling evidence, but no proof. That's the womanly phase of history. Prophecy was the male phase of history, when Hashem did it all and just said, absorb it. Now we're walking through the long walk of a pregnancy towards a crisis of birth. And it's only Emunah that will get us through. It's Emunah based on something. The Rambam says that life is like standing on a dark plain on a stormy night. You stand there beaten by the rain and lashed by the wind and hopelessly lost. And at your moment of greatest despair, suddenly there's a flash of lightning, and in that moment you see the road clearer than by day. And as you see it, the light disappears. And the rest of the night you walk through the storm on memory alone of a flash of light that you once saw. That's our lives. We have moments of clarity. But the moments of clarity are very, very few. The conception of a child is just the giving of a genetic code, that's all. And then there's a long walk through the pregnancy, every day a little bit less comfortable until finally there's a crisis of birth. That's what Purim teaches us. That's why the hero is a woman. That's why the faculty of the month is laughter. We are looking towards the great, hilarious unmasking of history, which will be an opportunity for us to say, Az Yamala Yitzchok Binu, and the one who will be able to teach that to Jewish people, Vatischak L'Yom Ha'achron, and say, woman's greatness, that will bring that into being. Is there any questions? I'm happy to. Yes.
Maybe I misunderstood, but in the beginning you said something about that we don't laugh at animals, but I feel like we do. When we go to the zoo, we laugh at the monkeys or whatever.
The question is, don't we laugh at animals? Why did you say monkey, by the way? One second, why did you say monkey?
Because they're funny.
Why did you not say the tigers and the lions?
They're not funny.
Why they're not funny? Why are monkeys funny?
Monkeys are funny because they're similar to us.
That's the point.
Okay, that's the answer.
You laugh at monkeys because they look like us. Some of us more than others, you understand. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.